Welcome back, everybody. Today has been such a wild news day that a lot of the stories I feel are important to cover and give my takes on are so brief, so short, but also crazy. And so I figured we would watch this new episode of Philip DeFranco because his new video that just dropped literally moments ago, based on its topic selection, covers all of these important issues I've been wanting to give my thoughts on with today's news. And I feel like we can just bundle it all into one super video. And we love Philip DeFranco here. It's no doubt going to be fun and entertaining, so if you end up enjoying your daily dose of news, then consider leaving a like on this video, subscribe and ring the bell icon to see more from me, comment down below. Commenting and liking force the YouTube algorithm to push my video out to more of my subscribers, and then later on, more new viewers, so it really does help. And if you want to see more from me in the future, and you want to kind of be a part of the community, subscribe and ring the bell icon, and join the fan Discord through the link down below. But without any further ado, I want to be very quick. Let's just get right into it. Let's figure out what's going on in the news today. Because, to be fair, I'm a little spoiled on it. I read the news, so it's been pretty wild.
Talk Rob Reiner updates and continued Trump fallout around it. And so, starting with updates around the case itself, we've now gotten reports that Rob and his wife Michelle, they got into a very loud argument with their son Nick at a party at Conan O'Brien's home before leaving Saturday night. And of course, when
I did a segment about this and I put it out this morning, didn't get a lot of traction, I assume because most of my fans don't know who Rob Reiner is, but I mean, it's a tragedy. And the way Trump responded, downright evil. And the fact he's now doubled down on it, of all things, I thought that might be something that would make Trump want to apologize, say, okay, all right, I admit it, I went too far there. But no, he doubled down.
their bodies were found the next morning, Nick was the prime suspect, hence why he's now reportedly in jail on suspicion of murder without bail, and we've seen photos of the moment that he was arrested. Right, and so reportedly he was at a subway station 15 miles from his parents' house. You could see the cops shoving him to the ground, handcuffing him. You had hotel staff reportedly finding blood all over the shower of his room, a trail of blood leading off his bed, and bed sheets covering the window. And so police, they said they presented their case to the LA district attorney, and prosecutors are
Did everything described there as like the most cliche guy is having a mental breakdown fueled by drugs and is now like a danger to himself and others checklist I've ever heard. Like that's the starter pack. Not to make light of the situation, but holy crap, that is a rough scene.
Expected to file charges by the end of Wednesday. But then all of that, it brings us to continued reactions. And where we'll start here is just a quick refresher of Trump's posts, right? Because he started his post almost seeming like a regular person before again revealing, hey, it's me, I'm a deranged monster. With him posting a very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood.
Hey, yo, you know, I have just been getting increasing levels of respect for Philip DeFranco. Bro can cook. He is just letting loose on Trump now, not even pretending to be a centrist, and I love it.
Tortured and struggling, but once very talented movie director and comedy star has passed away together with his wife, Michelle, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness, and with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before. May Rob and Michelle rest in peace. And in case anyone had any doubts if that was official, the White House's rapid response account on X also reposted it. Right, and then later on, when a reporter was like, hey, Mr. President, surely you didn't really mean it like that, we saw this.
Do you stand by that post?
Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He said he knew it was false. In fact, it's the exact opposite, that I was a friend of Russia, controlled by Russia. You know, it was the Russia hoax. He was one of the people.
Okay, type 1 in chat if you've heard Russia hoax before. That Russia hoax thing was never a hoax. I hope you guys know that. I hope you know it wasn't even a little bit a hoax. That Trump is completely lying, and that every Trump supporter who calls the Russiagate thing a Russia hoax is lying to you. They do not want you to look into that stuff because the amount of dirt, the amount of shit that came out, there was so many inquisitions and investigations and hearings. So many of Trump's cronies and fall guys went to prison. Trump's campaign objectively, provably was determined to have colluded with Russia. None of that shit was a conspiracy or a hoax.
Behind it, I think he hurt himself in career-wise. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all, in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country.
And that, to many, it was jarring, not only because he called this tragically murdered, beloved filmmaker deranged for having different politics than him, but also because he referred to himself in the third person as Trump.
He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned.
Which I guess, to stick with Trump's theme here, let me say, Philip DeFranco thinks that Donald Trump is a disgusting fucking monster. Like, many already feel that.
Is it like a thing with narcissists to speak in the third person? Because I remember Onision used to do that a lot, and people would give him a lot of shit for it, and rightly so. I'm noticing a lot of like similarities between Onision and Donald Trump.
Know that, but to see him handle a softball situation like this, to be like, wow, that was fucking horrific, thoughts and prayers. But no, instead he did his Trump thing. And so while, you expected the universal outrage and disgust from the entire left wing of the political spectrum.
It's so hateful and vile. When I first saw it, I thought it was fake. My wife showed it to me this morning. I was like, well, even for him, that seemed like too much, but nothing is ever too much for him.
You then also had people to the right of them chiming in, or even the likes of Piers Morgan sounding off.
That just crosses every line of just basic human decency.
But also, the most surprising reactions came from the MAGA right, where nearly all the big names with anything to say about this expressing some form of discomfort or disgust. And I say nearly because, some took a...
It really feels as though every couple days there's a new issue fracturing the right. This cannot be sustainable. This has got to be the beginning of the end for the right-wing content machine and the right-wing culture takeover. I mean, not the total end, but like, they've got to be on their way out. This era has got to be coming to its close.
Different tack, which we'll get into. But, you had the talking heads on Fox News seemingly pretty much unanimous on Trump's post.
I have to say that for the President of the United States to take this family tragedy in which both Reiner and his wife were killed and say that it's because of Trump derangement syndrome, I thought was well beneath him and beneath the office. And I think it would have been better if the President had...
Who here has been accused of having Trump derangement syndrome? It is the most enraging it's rage bait when they say that. It absolutely is. And it works on me every time. And it probably works on you too. To accuse anybody of having a syndrome of derangement about someone they criticize, when all of the criticisms are as apt as they could possibly be, and the reason why they're so frequently criticizing that person is because they're just that bad. Like, nothing is more enraging than to be accused of being deranged about that person. It's very effective bait.
No comment.
You also had several Republican lawmakers chiming in, including, as we saw yesterday, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but also Mike Lawler, Stephanie Bice, and John Kennedy.
I think when the president says these sorts of things, it detracts from his policy achievements.
But still, it was crickets from most of the GOP, with Senator Thomas Massie even commenting, I guess my elected GOP colleagues, the VP and White House staff, will just ignore it because they're afraid. And in response to that, the GOP leadership was basically like, yeah. Senate Majority Leader John Thune declining to comment on Trump's post when asked about it by reporters, and House Speaker Mike Johnson essentially saying it's not worth his time.
I don't do ongoing commentary about everything that's said by everybody in government every day.
We are the President of the United States.
We're trying to bring down healthcare costs for the American people.
Once again, the way these conservatives try to like shirk off responsibility for anything, it's like, well, I can't give my opinion on every take given by a Republican in the government. Sir, it's the President of the United States. I am talking about what Donald Trump said, the sitting most powerful man in the world.
But, embarrassing on its own, but I mean, even fucking Nick Fuentes had enough of a spine to criticize Trump for this.
This is ugly rhetoric. It is ugly. It is actually evil. Nobody deserves.
It's not that he has a spine, it's that Nick Fuentes is currently banking on and recognizes that there is a market for anti-Trump far-right content.
Deserves that. I don't care what their politics are, what they said on the internet or on television. Now, if Trump were actually doing what
MAGA's gonna have to accept reality and realize Trump is the establishment now.
He promised to do, you could overlook the fact that he's a douchebag. Well, what's actually the pitch now? You go on True Social and make a joke about Trump derangement syndrome? It just goes to show there was never anything there. There was never a center. It was always empty. You thought at one time that Trump really believed in America, believed in people, or something. I think he believes honestly in nothing.
But with all that said, you did have a handful of people on the right actually taking Trump's side. Though I'll say in a few different ways, right? First, you had the likes of Jack Posobiec, right? He's one of the people whose post claiming that
Nick Fuentes gets to be a safe right-wing funnel or I guess outlet for conservatives that voted for Trump to take their betrayal and frustration out on. Like, they don't have to shift to watching and consuming left-wing content or engaging with the left and talking with progressives in their lives and maybe reconsidering their beliefs. They can hear all of their opinions and feelings get validated by an even more conservative. A very far-right conservative, if you want to call Nick Fuentes that.
Nobody on the right was celebrating Reiner's murder, aged like moldy cheese, and he desperately tried to save face with a follow-up post writing, "Libs are trying to community note this with Trump's post. Where's the celebration in Trump's post? He isn't celebrating, he is warning." Then on a level of directness even higher than that, you had Trump advisor Alex Brusewitz writing, "I'm not going to participate in the fake outrage at President Trump for his response to Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner called for Trump to be arrested and charged with treason, a crime punishable by death. He was quite nasty toward the president. Regardless, RIP." And then finally, the most direct and unashamed of them all is the ghoul that is Laura Loomer, who wrote Psychosis.
They're doing exactly the thing that they were attacking everyone over Charlie Kirk with. Like, you could say Charlie Kirk's death was a tragedy, but then say, but he wasn't a hero, he was a racist piece of crap. And then they would say, he just died, how could you be so heartless? With Rob Reiner, simply because he criticized Trump, Trump's dick riders are like, listen, Rob was a crazy asshole. But still, rest in peace, though. They're doing the same thing that people were doing with Charlie Kirk, and now it's okay.
This is a real thing. Rob Reiner had a level of TDS that likely exuded a level of craziness around those he spent time with. Many people who have crazy
Notice how it's all of Trump's biggest brown-nosers?
Kids have psychiatric issues themselves. You'll notice a lot of celebrities have kids with addictions, trans kids, gay kids, spoiled kids, kids who commit crimes, and kids who are total deadbeat losers because many were raised to have no accountability by parents who subscribe to hardcore liberalism. Trump is right. Reiner himself sounded insane when he would speak. Imagine how crazy his own kid was, on drugs. But then, one last point I want to touch on with this news is something that's arguably in the same ballpark as Trump's post, but it's gotten far less attention. And that is the call for a mass expulsion of Muslims from the United States. Because after the anti-Semitic terror attack in Australia, you have 2 Republican congressmen not even bothering to qualify.
A couple days ago, there was a big terror attack targeting Jews in Australia. It was pretty bad. One badass, though, managed to wrestle the gun away from the shooter and almost blew the fucker away. The gun was empty, though. But the shooter was detained, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of people, like a good few people got hurt. And I think 1 or 2 people died. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. A lot of people were like, Australian gun laws didn't stop the shooting, huh? And it's like, well, I mean, all he had was a shotgun, and I think 16 people died. Damn. I was hearing the reports immediately after. That they trickled in pretty slow. My bad. But yeah, that's insane. The death count rose a lot from the initial reporting. That is, like, it was 1 or 2 deaths when I first heard the reporting. Good God. Yeah, so as you can imagine, I believe the shooter was confirmed to be Muslim. And because of that, or maybe not even religiously Muslim, but like at the very least was from a Muslim majority country. And because of that, the right's run away with this. It's like, once again, they've got another thing they can tie Arab people to, mostly, to try and claim that everybody who's brown and comes from that part of the world is a secret violent terrorist.
Their target as radical Muslims. They're just attacking Islam as a whole. And so you have Tommy Tuberville writing, Islam is not a religion, it's a cult. Islamists aren't here to assimilate, they're here to conquer. Stop worrying about offending the pearl clutchers. We've got to send them home now or we'll become the United Caliphate of America. As well as Randy Fine saying, this has to stop. Diversity is not our strength. Diversity has become suicidal. Saying it is time for a Muslim travel ban, radical deportation.
God, have you heard that phrase before, chat? Have you heard that one? The diversity has become suicidal line? I've been hearing it a lot lately. They've been trying to push this idea that not only diversity isn't just cringe, that's not their talking point anymore. Diversity is so harmful that being in favor of it is putting your life in active, imminent danger, because that's how scary and dangerous minorities are. Diversity is suicidal. Have you guys heard that one before?
Of all mainstream Muslim legal and illegal immigrants and citizenship revocations wherever possible. Mainstream Muslims have declared war on us. The least we can do is kick them the hell out of America. And then adding, Islamophobia is real, fear of Islam is rational. When you know it, just like the Trump post, Mike Johnson office refused to comment on Tuberville and Fine's comments when asked about them by the Washington Post. But also, as someone pointed out, this kind of unabashed Islamophobia, it's not new. It's been festering for a long time. Many saw it, of course, with Donald Trump as far back as 2015.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
And now more recently, he's called Somali immigrants garbage, advocated deporting all of them, and said that Ilhan Omar should be stripped of her citizenship and kicked out. Right, and also last month, you had Representative Brandon Gill saying much of the same as Tuberville and Fine did. Now with him writing, we imported Islamic terrorism in just the last few decades through our suicidal immigration system. It was a policy choice. The reality is,
There it is, suicidal immigration system. Y'all have to have been hearing this rhetoric they've been using. The like, it's not that wokeness is cringe anymore. It's not that wokeness is wrong. Wokeness is now suicidal. Woke kills now.
Is that not all cultures are morally equal. Islam is incompatible with our culture and our governing system. Radical Islamists seek to fundamentally destroy our way of life. Why would we allow them to immigrate here? Islamic ideology has no place in the West, and it's time our immigration system recognizes this. With then the House Freedom Caucus commenting on that post true. But then also even supposedly more moderate conservatives like Ben Shapiro seemed to suggest yesterday that Muslim immigration as a whole is dangerous.
There are good people inside every religion. The question, of course, is whether when you import an enormous number of people of any particular religion, that changes the culture of the country.
I love the word import that they love to use when it comes to immigration because it inherently depersonifies immigrants and uses objectifying language in the most literal sense, like objects, like goods and commodities in trade are imported.
Or whether it creates enclaves that are dangerous to the rest of the country.
And of course, all of this despite the fact that Muslim groups and Arab governments, they widely condemn the violence in Australia and elsewhere. And of course, I mean, the guy who tackled one of the shooters was himself a Muslim. You know, for now, we're gonna have to wait to see how this continues.
Really? Wow! That part of the fucking story should be in the headlines. That part of the story should be in the goddamn headlines. That's fucking that's very fucking interesting how that is not more known. How I didn't even know that part of the story. That the badass who disarmed the shooter was Muslim. You got to admit that at least cancels out the ill done by the shooter. But of course, these right-wingers have a prerogative to cover up that detail of the story. Can't be having that hero's name get out there. His name was Ahmed Almad. No wonder everybody calls the hero who disarmed the shooter that guy. No wonder they won't say his name, because people might say, wait a second.
Continues to play out. And of course, in the meantime, I'd love to know your reactions to everything that's going down. And then we're going to dive into even more in just a minute. But first, let me say, holiday spending season, it always tricks me. I start with, I'll just grab a few gifts and suddenly my cart looks like I'm 2 apartments ago. So, Rocket Money. Rocketmoney.com during his entire first. But then next up in the news today, fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction. That is Donald.
People were asking me what my take was on this earlier. And I feel like this is the perfect time to give my take now. Y'all were asking me. Here we go.
Trump has now claimed in his 221st executive order of his second term, which also, just fun history fact, means that he's...
Oh, he has a GoFundMe. Ahmed has a GoFundMe. And people are apparently raising a lot of money for him. Awesome.
He's now signed more executive orders in 2025 than during his entire first 4 years in office, a full 1/3 of which, by the way, have been challenged in court. While it's not clear yet whether this latest one's going to spark any legal action, it's definitely controversial. So specifically, this designates illicit fentanyl and its core precursor chemicals as weapons of mass destruction, and it claims that the potential for
Listen, I do think it's important. All right. The war on drugs is cringe. This is beyond war on drugs. This is like 9/11 on drugs. I don't even know what else to call it. This is ridiculous. This is absurd. But I do admit that when it comes to prescribed opiates, such as fentanyl, there is a serious problem with pharmaceutical companies incentivizing doctors, surgeons, and nurses to administer and prescribe very powerful opiate drugs, such as fentanyl and oxy, for any number of things, even a simple ache or pain. Get them hooked on that drug, and then all of a sudden they've created an addict that'll never stop needing the product. The opiate crisis in America has been the _1 source of profit for these, pharmaceutical companies that specialize in opiates. So there does need to be something done about fentanyl. But it's not the people who are taking and selling the fentanyl that are the problem. It's the doctors that are prescribing people and getting them hooked on their first dose of fentanyl in their lives. Most people who get an opiate addiction started with a prescription. That needs to stop.
To be weaponized for concentrated large-scale terror attacks by organized adversaries is a serious threat to the United States. With it then directing the heads of relevant executive departments and agencies to take additional steps to combat the drug. Right? And that includes by telling the defense and attorney general to determine whether the threats posed by illicit fentanyl is enough to justify providing military resources to the Justice Department. And so this very much...
I cannot believe Trump is literally going to end up invading Venezuela to look for WMDs. You could not write a better story than this.
looks like the Trump administration's latest effort to provide legal cover for their lethal strikes on boats that it said, without providing evidence, are carrying drugs into the U.S. Which also, on that note, the military carried out another 3 of those strikes just yesterday in the Eastern Pacific, killing 8 people and bringing the total death toll to at least 95. And that's also
Trump could not be fumbling the bag worse right now when it comes to optics.
as they brought warships to the region, seized a Venezuelan oil tanker, and been flying aircraft near Venezuelan airspace. Which, I mention not only because it's part of Trump's pressure campaign on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, but also because one of them may have almost caused a deadly accident last week. Or because last Friday, you had a JetBlue pilot reporting that a U.S. Air Force plane passed in front of him without broadcasting its position. Right? And they had this conversation with air traffic control.
They passed directly in our flight path. We had to stop our climb. They are not.
I literally had a rant earlier this stream about how when Trump is out of office, we're going to get so much declassified info about how botched all of Trump's horribly ran and rushed military operations he ordered under his presidency, like back during his first term. We're already getting it. It's already happening. We're already getting the info. I cannot wait, dude. You got to know, behind the scenes, the stuff we don't know right now, it is just chaos. It is that one meme of all the SpongeBobs and everything's on fire and in chaos, and we don't know it.
Painting, they don't have their transponder turned on. It's outrageous.
W1112, yes, I don't have anything on my scope. It has been outrageous with the unidentified aircraft within our airspace. You are totally right, sir.
Well, I apologize. If you can make a note of it, we almost had a mid-air collision up here.
But going back to Trump's designation of fentanyl as a WMD, it's not clear if and what kind of practical impact this order will actually even have. Fentanyl is already illegal, and the idea that it's likely to be weaponized for concentrated, large-scale terror attacks is, at the very least, we'll call it contested. But there is reportedly one documented instance of fentanyl being used as a bioweapon back in Moscow in 2002. There was a hostage crisis, and during that, you had Russian security services releasing gas believed to contain a aerosolized fentanyl analog into a theater. And, I guess it technically succeeded in killing the 40 hostage takers, but it also resulted in the deaths of as many as 132 hostages. But nothing like that, it appears to have happened before or since. And while in 2019, you had the Center for the Study of Weapons of Mass Destruction at the National Defense University publishing a report acknowledging the chemical weapon potential of fentanyl, it also said it is not evident that there is any basis or need.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, fentanyl, if I had to be war crimed to death in any way, or WMD to death in any way, I would pick the fentanyl dust cloud, okay? Like, I would love for, of all the options, getting burned to death with, gas, acidic gas or something, or any number of horrible options, the fentanyl cloud is very preferable.
Need for or net benefit to officially designating fentanyl compounds as weapons of mass destruction. And you had a professor at...
Listen, chat, you tell me, all right? I want to know from you guys in the chat, would you take the gas or the fentanyl cloud? I'd go with the fentanyl cloud.
Carnegie Mellon University, who researches drugs, crime, and terror,
or flamethrower,
are also arguing. I personally would prefer not to call every single thing that kills a large number of people a weapon of mass destruction. By those arguments, cigarettes would be weapons of mass destruction. Cigarettes kill more Americans every year than fentanyl does. Right? And so with that, we should also be clear about exactly how many Americans fentanyl kills. And the answer, it's a lot. According to the CDC, it was around 48,000 people in the US last year alone. It's obviously a lot, but also it was a surprising 27% drop from the year before. But then also...
It's crazy to me that COVID's not real, and it's a made-up fake hoax or whatever, but also, fentanyl's the biggest threat to human life on the planet at the same time. And the amount of people that one has killed compared to the other is fractional.
It's a far smaller number than the numbers that the White House is using. When Trump signed the order yesterday, he falsely claimed that 200,000 to 300,000 people die every year from fentanyl. And that, as Trump has repeatedly claimed, that every boat strike, and there have been at least 25 so far, saves 25,000 American lives. Right?
How many have died from fentanyl-related complications? 40,000, compared to the, I think millions that died from COVID so far?
Which, sounds crazy, but not when you compare it to back in April, way before the boat strikes even began. Pam Bondi made the just truly astonishing claim that the drug bust during the first 100 days of the administration had saved 258 million American lives, or roughly 3/4 of the entire US population. While I could end this on just kind of laughing about the stupidity of this administration's numbers, I do want to be very clear. All the evidence right now, it suggests that the White House has actually little interest in fighting overdose deaths. It may even actually be making matters worse.
It's absurd now how you literally can't get any reliable data from any government institution anymore because Trump has gutted all of them, and they no longer track or reliably report any data. You have to go to independent sources now.
But as far as the boat strikes, most experts say that the strikes will have little to no impact on overdose deaths, largely because if you do any fucking research into this, you learn that fentanyl doesn't come out of Venezuela and the drugs that do are largely heading to Europe. But this also is you have an expert on street drugs at the Cato Institute saying that he's worried that strikes are just going to encourage cartels to shift drug production away from cocaine and towards synthetic substances, including fentanyl, which is deadlier and easier to move, saying, all we're doing is making the cartels come up with more potent and powerful forms of drugs to smuggle. And then beyond that, there's the fact that Trump's pardoned and freed high-level drug traffickers, gang leaders, and corrupt officials linked to cartels. He's reassigned law enforcement agents working on drug trafficking.
It's so wild how, like, the Republicans will hand their supporters $5 with one hand and take $10 out of their pockets with the other. You know what I mean? Like, they will run on policy of cracking down on immigration and, you know, going hard against the cartels, and they'll do that in a lot of ways, like in unprecedented ways, but then in a lot of other unprecedented ways behind the scenes, they'll cherry pick how soft they'll be, you know? Like, certain people are allowed in, you know, they'll start buddying up with certain cartel groups. Everything they virtue signal about is always a lie. Conservatives are not capable of genuine virtue signaling. It's always some kind of lie.
Trafficking, including some from the DEA to help out with immigration enforcement, and he's cut staff and resources from key federal agencies specializing in drug policy, addiction treatment, and research. And so then with all that, you might have an uncle going, well, if the action targeting Venezuela isn't about fighting drug trafficking, what is it actually about? Well, of course, you could mention, as we've talked about before, the real aim seems to be getting rid of Maduro, but to take it even further, you have more and more people believing that maybe this is about oil. Venezuela, they have about 17% of the world's known oil reserves, nearly 4 times the amount of the US. And even though, you know, Trump hasn't mentioned oil in his public comments on the campaign, reportedly he has often mentioned it in private. And in talks this year, US officials reportedly negotiated with Maduro on a potential deal to push Chinese and Russian oil companies out of Venezuela to open up a bigger role for American companies. And Maduro, he actually made an offer that Trump only rejected because advisors convinced him that Maduro just couldn't be trusted and was just biding time. Also, notably, Venezuela's main opposition leader, who won the Nobel Prize and has voiced support for Trump's violent, deadly, and likely illegal boat strikes, recently said in remarks at a business conference with Trump in attendance, I am talking about a $1.7 trillion opportunity. We will open up all upstream, midstream, downstream to all companies. And so once again, it looks like
from what I've seen, she's got a lot of problems, but she's opposed to Maduro and is overall the lesser of two evils from what I have seen. But Maduro is pretty bad. We should not go to war with Venezuela, though. If we had Biden in office or someone smart, we would probably have, like, I don't know, the CIA rigging their next election. No, she's worse. Is she? Isn't she at the very least more America-friendly? Like, she may be worse, but she can't be worse on America, right? Yeah, if Biden was in power, we'd just have the CIA rig their next election. That's what we do.
Situation where you have
Instead, we're potentially going to go to war. She begged Donnie to bomb Venezuela. Yeah, I mean, she didn't beg Donald to bomb Venezuela. Like, in general, she is in favor of the ship bombings. Which, to be fair, you know, that's a part of Maduro's whole thing and his failures, so it would make sense why she would virtue signal by being in favor of it.
The administration saying it's about one thing when really it looks more about another thing. But for now, we'll have to wait to see how this plays out. And then we're going to break down even more in a minute. But first, let me say, nothing humbles you faster than realizing one fun night out, it can delete every...
Damn, 2 sponsors in one video. God damn. You know, I need to start taking up sponsorships, man. Everybody does sponsors now. YouTube's a rough world out here. All the creators, even the most successful ones, are cranking up the sponsors. I need to start taking sponsors, honestly.
First order. Tomorrow you will be very, very grateful. And then we've got to talk about these insane Susie Wiles interviews and what's coming out today. Right, so Susie Wiles is, of course, Donald Trump's White House chief of staff. And well, she, over the course of Trump's first year back in office, gave 11 interviews with Chris Whipple. And well, he published her comments in Vanity Fair. And when I was reading some of it, I was like, these were on the record conversations, because a number of her statements, they come off like, why would you say that knowing that it was being recorded? Right, so of Donald Trump, she says he has an alcoholic's personality, saying Trump has a view that there's nothing he can't do, nothing, zero, nothing. Earlier. Saying because she had experience with her father, who was an alcoholic and an absentee parent, she knows how to handle him. Or saying she's a little bit of an expert in big personalities. She then goes on to say Vice President J.D. Vance has been a conspiracy theorist for a decade. Instead of Vance coming...
Many don't know this, but Trump and J.D. Vance have also been fucking for months at the White House behind the scenes.
Over to Trump's side, it was kind of a political decision, whereas Marco Rubio, he kind of had to work his way through things. Of Elon Musk, she said he's an odd duck.
She does. She looks perpetually horrified by him. That's true.
I think geniuses are. She also called him an avowed ketamine user, but the Times is reporting that she later told the Times that she didn't have any actual knowledge of that beyond his own statements. Regarding Donald Trump and Bill Clinton being in the Epstein files, she said, yes, they both are in them. They're also reportedly saying that there's no evidence that Mr. Clinton went to the island. And reportedly, when asked if there was any incriminating information about Clinton in the Epstein files, she said the president was wrong about that. Right, and then...
Oh, dude, could you imagine how fucking devastated conservatives would be if the Epstein files are full of Trump and there's no Bill Clinton? Oh, man. If there's no Bill or Hillary in the files and it's just all Trump, they might actually, like, the Donald.win might have to put that suicide prevention hotline number back up on their banner. Who remembers that? Hypers in chat, or type 1 in chat if you remember that. After Biden won, for like 2 months, the Donald.win, the #1, like, Trumper forum, had to plaster a suicide prevention hotline number on the top of their main website because so many posts were just people essentially writing suicide notes.
Regarding what Trump's been doing with Venezuela and blowing up boats, she said, he wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle, and people way smarter than me on that say that he will. With that, appearing to make it clear that regime change, that's the real goal there. Also, regarding Pam Bondi, she said Pam essentially dropped the ball regarding the Epstein files, saying I think she completely whiffed on appreciating that was the very targeted group that cared about this. First, she gave them binders full of nothingness, and then she said that the witness list or the client list was on her desk. There is no client list, and it sure as hell wasn't on her desk. Right, and all of this, it's kind of just the highlights. I recommend checking out the full article. Though I will say, now that it's been released, one of the people not a fan of this article is Susie Wiles herself. With Wiles tweeting this morning, the article published early this morning is a disingenuously framed hit piece on me and the finest president, White House staff, and cabinet in history. Significant context was disregarded, and much of what I and others said about the team and the president was left out of the story. I assume, after reading it, that this
I like how she's now walking it back because everyone's going after her now.
Was done to paint an overwhelmingly chaotic and negative narrative about the president and our team. With then much of the White House team also posting tweets in support, as well as it now being reported, President Trump defended White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles in an exclusive interview with the Post Tuesday, saying she was right to tell Vanity Fair he is an alcoholic's personality and that he has full faith in Wiles to continue in her role. And so for now, really, only time will tell how things go from here. Right? Does this stir things up and we eventually see a fallout, or do things calm and settle and whatever needs to happen privately gets handled privately, and then as far as the public version, it's all a united front? But then, next up with the news, AI is causing tons of things to get more expensive, and I'm not even talking about the software side of things. Yep. Which, to be clear, many are finding it to be a waste of money.
AI is taking jobs, and it's making everything impossible to afford. The golden duo of fuck humanity, I guess. We're so cooked, man. We are so cooked. We need that AI bubble to pop, and we need it to pop fast.
Because companies like Microsoft are finding out that no one wants AI all over their stuff, but also the hardware itself has had a huge ripple effect across so many things. In many markets, electricity prices are skyrocketing. Also, if you're in the market for any kind of electronics, like pull the trigger sooner than later. And that because we're already seeing those prices go through the roof as companies shift all their sales.
That's the last thing you ever want to hear. Yeah, I know everything is really expensive right now, but if you plan on buying anything, you should buy it now because it's only going to get more expensive in the future. This is the cheapest it's going to be anytime soon. That is the worst thing you can hear. When it's already unaffordable and you're like, buy now. It's only going to get more expensive. It's like, oh, fuck, man.
AI data centers rather than household consumers. Right? And the idea that tech companies are taking up so many resources from everyday people is so concerning that a handful of Senate Democrats actually announced today that they're launching an investigation. And in this letter that they sent to the usual suspects, they said that they were worried that their AI data centers were using so much electricity that it forced utility companies to upgrade their grids. Which, on the surface, that doesn't seem bad, except, the money, it has to come from somewhere. It's not like Microsoft's just fronting that bill. Instead, utility companies just raise the rates for all their customers. Now, we will say that's not universally true, with some of these companies making deals with local utilities.
I did notice my power bill getting more expensive the last couple years, just every year during the summer and winter, which is when, I use the most power respectively. The bill's a little higher every year, like noticeably, enough that I'm like, that's higher than it was last time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's happening in Seattle as well. I bet there's a bunch of data centers where they're generating AI slops somewhere in my city.
to try and get a bigger share for their increased usage, but figuring out exactly what that breakdown should be, it's proven to be hard. And interestingly, these data centers weren't always bad for their local communities. In fact, one study found that as utility companies upgraded their infrastructure, it actually lowered costs for retail consumers overall because it was able to spread out the cost of upgrades that benefited everyone. Now that many of the cheaper, most cost-effective upgrades are already done and more is still needed, it's expected that the opposite's going to hold true. And this need for built-up infrastructure for AI, I mean, it hasn't gone unnoticed by people either. But I just spoke to economist and best-selling author Kyla Scanlon on my In Good Faith podcast for about an hour, and she actually touched on this.
When we think about AI, it's 40% of GDP growth, 75% of S&P 500 earnings. So we have staked the entire economy on this thing. But the problem that we're running into,
when the AI bubble pops, the economy bubble pops. It's bad.
Is the problem with expanding AI and like having it potentially take all the jobs is not better models, it's energy. So AI is ultimately an energy race. And the US decided that the sun was DEI or woke or whatever, and has rolled back a lot of renewable energy projects that were very important to having AI be successful. And so I think that's what the US is running into right now, is that these huge data centers are straining grids, they're causing electricity prices to go up. And it's like, sure, the models can be great, but I don't know if the grid can maintain it. Like, that is the number one risk. And then number two is China. And companies like Airbnb are choosing to use China's AI models because they're cheaper. So it's always going to be a price war at the end of the game, at the end of the day.
America lost the battle against China the second they voted Trump back into office over Biden or Kamala. Biden and Kamala had the best plan ever conceived by a presidential administration to take the lead in the economic, in the world market. Like, the CHIPS Act was so base, the amount of jobs created under Biden, like, they weren't perfect, but, like, when it came to the American Rescue Plan and the, American Recovery Plan, it was very, very concrete. It was solid, and it worked.
And it's always going to be an energy war. And right now, China's winning in both. Because you can have all of these pie-in-the-sky plans, but you have to think about physical infrastructure. And the US doesn't, ever. And so that's, I think, that could pop the bubble, that could make it so it doesn't take the jobs. And those are the things I'm really paying attention to.
I just can't understate how much China has invested into its electrical grid compared to the United States and what an advantage it is, right? They've actually been doing this for about a decade now, to the point that it's the biggest in the world, and it produces about twice the electricity that the United States does. In fact, they have so much of it that their AI data centers are paying about half of what ours do per watt. And a lot of that growth, it's due to China investing heavily into green energies like solar, wind, and hydroelectric especially. Whereas the United States, especially under the Trump presidency, we're going in the opposite direction and cutting funding for a lot of those programs. And that's just one way that AI is screwing consumers in the States. There's also the appetite for computer memory causing...
At one point, mostly pre-2000s, conservative politics, they're opposition to things like green energy, was a very economically beneficial thing. Republicans, they, when they're in power, the economy gets fucked and minorities lose rights. But at the end of the day, the economy is in a good spot. Climate change is, no one believes in climate change or anything that's in government, but the economy is good because, America's selling a lot of oil. But that's not the case anymore. Republicans now still push for the same policies and the same ideas, but those are not the best decisions to make economically anymore. So not only do we get shitty policy, but we don't even get the somewhat silver lining outcome to that shitty policy. They did fuck the economy too, but they did not fuck it as hard as what we're used to in the last decade or so. Bina Becker.
Issues all over the globe. We're at a point where key electronic components are seeing 100% plus price increases in just a matter of months, and that's likely going to go up. And without getting too specific, AI data centers need a lot of memory and RAM. RAM, it's used by just about everything that computes. So computers, phones,
the RAM
consoles,
shortage.
Smart TVs, appliances, cars, our entire modern world.
Dude, you know what else uses RAM that I found out recently? ATMs. ATMs use RAM. Of course they do. It makes sense when you think about it for a minute, but that just tells you, yep, pretty much anything with a screen uses RAM.
world. You know, AI companies, they now need so much of it that it's now a better deal for RAM manufacturers to just sell to them and ignore retail consumers like you or me. I mean, just look at Micron, one of the big 3 RAM manufacturers in the world. They announced just a few weeks ago that they'd be leaving the consumer market entirely. And now you've got Samsung warning that there's going to be such a massive shortage that RAM prices are going to spike 100% as they have no stock for normal consumers. And you know, it's also expected that Samsung's going to announce in January that some of the most popular and cost-effective hard drives are going to be impossible to get. Then, you know, add in the fact that most of these items, they're made overseas and face big tariffs under Trump, and the easy conclusion is that if you want some kind of electronic, it's better to get it now than later. You know, all of this in order to fuel an industry that really fully, if you take a deep dive into it, hasn't made a product that actually generates money, right? And well, that's not to say that it never will. It really just puts an even bigger spotlight into what just a massive, massive bet this is for, yes,
at least it's taking all our jobs, right? That's good, right? It's good at that.
The United States, but also in other ways, much of the world. So that, my friends, is the end of today's Philip DeFranco.
That is a good video right there. Philip DeFranco, like I said a lot recently, he's been cooking. I'm telling you guys, if you're not on the Philly D train, you need to get on it. You need to get on Philly's D, all right? You need to get on there. Anyway, folks, if you ended up enjoying this video, if you found it entertaining, educational, or enjoyable in any way whatsoever, and you want to support the channel, leave a like and a comment down below. It tells YouTube my content's good and to push it to more people. I really do appreciate it. If you don't know what to say down below, how about you comment kelp? That'll be our key word, our code word, so I know you watched all the way to the end. I really do appreciate it. And make sure to subscribe and ring the bell icon if you want to see more from me in the future, and you want YouTube to tell you when I go live or upload. And join my fan Discord too to be a part of the main hub of my community and fan base. I hope to see you around there. But until next time, thank you for watching. I hope to see you again.